Hi, everyone. Hello to all my fellow travelers out there. I'm Helen Taylor. Welcome to the inspired radio series You Are Supernatural. I'm here with you for conversations and stories that awaken something within us and contribute to the creation of a new world. My stories explore past lives, karma, auras, energies, demons, dimensions, timelines, out of body, quantum possibilities. We're going to venture beyond what we've been told is real and discover what else is possible, right? Through my experiences, I've learned a lot. I've learned that we are supernatural, and I'm going to be your guide today. So let's get started. Um, I started this show because I want everyone to know we are supernatural. That's it, right? And I've got a wealth of experiences and information to back up everything that I'm saying. Um, Doing this show itself, like at first I started having guests on and doing what I was doing with my radio show, having guests and getting them to tell their stories. And I didn't realize until last week I did the first show with just me in it. I was avoiding doing the show with just me in it. There's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, it feels really clunky. It feels really clunky. I love conversations and I love having conversations with other people. So sitting here having a conversation with you and you're not here at the moment felt really clunky. The second thing, and I just realized this just now, is my energy, the way I'm wired. We're all wired in different ways. And for my wiring, I highly recommend something called human design. Go and have a look. I checked into it over 10 years ago now, but it gave me an understanding of my circuitry and how I'm wired. And I work better. I have kind of different circuitry in my body that's disconnected, and it's other people who connect it. I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, go and just do some investigating a human design and figure it out. But I'm a triple split definition, and it gave me an explanation for why I work better around others than I do on my own. It's all to do with wiring. So that was the other reason. And the third reason, big one, I was terrified. I didn't realize just how terrified I was. Isn't it funny? Right? I can sit and I can talk to other people. I can have great conversations. I can record them. I can go live to air. I can record and put that to air. But it was actually being present, just myself, and telling my story. And, I've been tapped on the shoulder for so long to tell my story that I'm really a little proud of myself that I'm actually doing it. So thank you for being a part of this journey. And even the feedback from my first show last week that was on my own was wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. People resonate with our stories, resonate with our stories, right? They do. So we've all got a story to tell. So I'm going to continue mine. So last week was about programs. It was a bit of a short introduction into programs and how I see that everything in this world programs. And you're either living your own and creating your own, or you're, co-creating with everybody else and living other people's lives. That's a bit of a snapshot. Go and have a listen. It's a half an hour. Go and have a listen if you want to hear a bit more about programs. So today, I'm still going through my book, okay? And I'd like to start firstly with reading out the introduction that I've got in the book. It's a short introduction page, and I just find it, I don't know, it's really relevant to just set the scene for today before we get into what the main theme is. And I'll let you know that in a minute. So, introduction. This book is for everyone who has ever felt lost, alone, and broken. I know you very well, and I figured it all out. I extend my hand to you, not as someone who has all the answers, but as a guide who has navigated the depths of my soul and emerged stronger and wiser on the other side. I share my story not for sympathy, but because I believe now in my power and the power of something even greater that I discovered along the way. I wrote these words not merely to inspire you, but to encourage change. I want you to know that the shackles that bind you can be broken, the cycles that confine you can be shattered, and the love that seems so distant can be found within your own heart. I also know that just by reading this book, you will change for the better. You will begin to transform and slowly rise above whatever or whoever it is that has been holding you back. Because you, my friend, are not merely a collection of broken pieces, you are a grand masterpiece, the greatest creation on this earth. You are love. This is not just my book, it is my lifeline. I offer it to you with the hope that it becomes a source of strength to you and a reminder that no matter how deep the abyss, there is always a way out. So let's begin the journey together. Today, storytelling change us, right? They change us. Just you listening changes you. I don't want to tell you what to do. This is something else that I just wrote down as I was thinking about this show, and it's sort of like a precursor to the subject. I don't want to tell you what to do. I want to share my stories, the things that I've learned, and I hope they help to give you insight. Change doesn't happen by talking at someone. A lot of people are doing that out there, talking at you and telling you what to do and whatever. Change happens by encouragement. I love that. I love that. It's all about language. I want to share my stories and how I changed. I lived it. I figured out how to evolve out of the stories. I unplugged story by story out of what I call the programming. I dug deeper again and again until I revealed my truth, the original me. Me. Right? That's what you're all trying to find is you. You know, we get buried under the world out there. We get buried under programs and ideas and different identities about ourselves. We get buried. I truly believe that conversation changes us. So let's get into today's conversation. Today is all about trauma. Big topic. Big topic. And firstly, I just want to say respectfully to anybody out there, no matter what you've been through, no matter what you're going through, I'm not being flippant when I call it a story, and I'm not being flippant and disrespectful when I say that you can get over it. Okay. So please don't get into the language so much. Don't read too much into certain words. I'm talking to you from the other side. Like, I've gone through cycles and cycles and years to get to this point where I can look at it from a very detached and very powerful perspective, I suppose, and go, it's not me. It's not me. I don't identify with that anymore. Okay. So, yes, and my love to all of you, whatever you're going through. Okay. Because I wish I had somebody there telling me some stories and sending me some love. And I suppose there were when I was going through these things I'm about to talk about. So I think I'm going to break this up into two shows because I really want to unravel it slowly, right? Because for all of us out there, you might be here on the journey and I'm here, and this is only for perspective, right? It's not about space and better than and worse than and above and below and all that. It's just the gap of experience in between. That's what it becomes, right? I'm here, but I've got a whole bunch of experience in between that I have that has evolved me, that I've learned from, that I've shifted from, that I've stepped out of. Language. It's language again, right? So let's get into it, okay? Chapter 1, this is in my book, and if you want a copy of my book, there's a link underneath in the show notes here. When I went to start writing this book, I didn't want to write my childhood. I didn't want to write any of it. I didn't want it in there. I I'd come to peace and come to terms with my dad and the things that had happened. And I was, I think, respectfully just going, I don't need to make that public. I don't need to. But when I started writing the book and I was writing a chapter of me in my 20s and my boyfriend that I was with at the time smacking me in the mouth, boom, and knocking a couple of teeth out while I was driving a car, The police pulled us up, and I immediately called it an accident. When I started writing that part of the story, I thought, how is anybody ever going to understand how I reacted that way? Why I reacted that way? Because anyone in their right mind, if they've just been smacked in the mouth by somebody, that's actually caused them to swerve over the road a bit to the point of getting the police's attention in a car down behind you somewhere, um, and doesn't go, it was him, he did it. Something's going on, isn't it? Something's going on. So it was while I was writing that chapter that I went, how's anyone going to know why I immediately said, we're from Australia, because we were driving in America at the time. We're from Australia, driving on the wrong side of the road, driving a convertible, a big car that I'd never driven before. I blamed all sorts of things instead of just going, it was him. He hit me. So it was after that that I realized I had to tell you how that version of Helen was built, the building blocks of her that brought it to a point where she took responsibility for what somebody else did and blamed all sorts of other events instead of the man that hit me. Okay. So let's get into Helen, where it all started. So this chapter is called, What is this place? Heaven or Hell? Because honestly, even as a kid, I don't know whether you've done it as well. I used to look around me and go, why is everyone behaving the way that they are? Where's the love in this world? I knew it was missing. So before I go into my childhood, I would like to declare something. There is a little girl inside me. She was severely abused and traumatized during the first 10 years of her life. So I'm going to begin first by taking hold of her and taking care of her before I begin to tell our story. This isn't very easy for either of us. I want to thank her for her bravery and for letting me tell her story, because without it, what happened to me later in life wouldn't have made as much sense to you at all. On the 15th of April, 1961, I was born into this world, so innocent and so pure. I had blonde hair that was almost white and big blue eyes. I was filled with so much love. Unfortunately, love wasn't valued highly in the family I was born into. My dad didn't have love, he was broken. And my mum had an enormous heart, but she wasn't allowed to use it much. You'll find out why as we continue this journey. The next part of this chapter is titled Mum and Dad. So let me explain a little about Mum and Dad, and thank you for letting me do this, right? Because it just sets the scene, okay, for the trauma we're going to start to talk about. And I'm going to show you or talk to you about how I started to deal with it. Mum and Dad. Let me explain a little about Mum and Dad. Mum was a natural beauty with a big, beautiful heart and so full of wonder. Her name was Dorothy. And I put here insight. What I mean by wonder is innocence. This is something really important to understand. Some people call it being naive, but it's actually a beautiful innocence that really does see the world as a place full of wonder. I know that feeling because I've lived my life that way too. Have you? You know, seen the world from that innocence, from that sense of wonder? And I put that bit in there because I had judged myself so many times in life, saying I was so naive, I didn't understand things, but I had that sense of wonder, and I'm sure that you do too. She was one of 4 children, an older and younger sister and a younger brother, born to hard-working parents who were pillars of the Deniliquin community. Her mother ran the home like clockwork, and her father was a tough man, no nonsense. She followed her oldest sister to the city. She was a country girl who left home to go to the big smoke and follow her dreams. She found herself a job and enjoyed 2 of her loves, playing tennis and traveling. It wasn't long before she'd saved up and bought herself a Morris Minor, a very nice car for the times. Dad was an only child, raised in the inner suburbs of Melbourne. His name was Ronald. He was a very different story to Mum. His father was Albert. Dad was the product of Albert's second marriage. Albert had a daughter from the first marriage, Winifred, who had been one of twins. The twin and Albert's first wife both died in childbirth. Dad's mother, Jean, was the second wife. It really is an era, isn't it? That generation back there. There was a lot of hardship. There was a lot of tough stuff going on. Dad lost his left arm from gangrene at the age of 8. It was amputated just below the shoulder. Not long after that, he lost his father. His mother really didn't like children. After Albert's death, she sent the stepsister Winifred away to live with her maternal grandmother. Dad suffered a lot of trauma at such a young age, and unfortunately, that shaped his view of the world. I've got another little insight here. Later in my life, I would learn more about my dad's mother during conversations with his stepsister, my Auntie Win. Dad's mum was not a very nice person. She was very self-absorbed and not very maternal. Unfortunately, our parents teach us how to be parents, the good and the bad. Dad was a handsome man who loved football and cricket. He was driven. He was going to make something of himself no matter what. And I think, I don't know, through all that hardship and losing his arm and all sorts of things, it kind of spurred him on. What do you reckon? Mum and Dad met at the Hawthorn Town Hall. Regular dances were held there and were a great way to meet other people and have some fun. After a whirlwind romance, they were married on the 2nd of July, 1960, then quickly got pregnant and along came me. Something was wrong though, because I don't think Dad wanted kids. He certainly didn't want me around, and that became apparent very, very quickly. The stories I'm about to share were talked about many times throughout my life, but I can't actually remember them myself. Isn't it funny that you can't remember a lot of your childhood, but just some significant events stand out? The following are 2 events I can still recall. So the next part here is called Parenting Patterns Repeat. You're starting to see some things here. You're starting to see like mum came from country home, country family, country upbringing. Dad was suburban and there was a lot of trauma going on there. Mum came to the big smoke to live her dreams and met a man who was pretty broken, had a lot of his own stuff going on. How do those 2 universes connect? Hey? I think you get what I'm trying to say here. So, parenting patterns repeat. At around 18 months old, my dad drove me to my Auntie Win's, which was his stepsister, and tried to leave me there. Auntie Win refused and sent him back home, and he got really angry. On the way home, he slammed on the brakes of the car while I was standing next to him on the bench seat. Yes, this was before seatbelts. And I smacked my face into the dashboard of the car. I remember the horrified look on my mum's face when she walked out the front door of the house to greet us and saw me covered in blood and missing a few baby teeth. He told her it was an accident. I remember them arguing. They argued a lot. This was just the beginning of many things he did to me. He terrified me. He was nasty, and he was a quiet threat. From the ages of 4 to 10, my father abused me. He came into my room at night, molested me, and poisoned my mind with his words. He warned me of many things. He said I would die if I told anyone. I had to hold the blankets up over my head and not make any noise, or someone would come and cut off my ears. I've got a little insight here as well. You know, I slept with the doona over my ears right up till I was in my 30s, and I never questioned why. I only stopped one day because I wondered why I was even doing it. Isn't that amazing? You know, he told me, yep, that if I said anything to anyone, he would cut off my ears. That was part of what was said. And I slept with the doona up over my ears until in my 30s. That behavior, I mean, when I talk about poisoning somebody's mind, that behavior was there with me, that programming, right? There were times when he would nearly get caught, but he pretended to be playing games with me, like being a ghost and shaking my bed or hiding under my bed. Hiding under my bed became another weird trigger later in life. From time to time, I would have a problem sitting up in bed and just hanging my feet over the side. I would have an unrealistic thought of someone grabbing my ankles, and of course, I was afraid of the dark. The things he did to me systematically broke me down and convinced me that I was a mistake, that I should never have been born, and that I was useless, worthless. Memories of these times were never far from my mind. The memories came back to me strongly a year later in my late 30s as old dreams began to resurface. All throughout my childhood, I had recurring dreams. There was a big dog that would grab me as I was coming home from school. The dog would either drop me down the drain, which was down the street from our house, or take me to a park where there was a large home surrounded by a high wire fence, and it would throw me over the fence into the home. And it wasn't a nice home to visit. These weren't dreams, they were nightmares. I would also have recurring thoughts while I was awake at night, thoughts and visions of being stabbed. They were the strangest things to think of and experience. I wasn't really being stabbed, but why was I so worried about it? I had no clue. Dad went to great lengths to make sure I would say nothing. Whenever no one else was around or no one else was home, he would tell me repeatedly how worthless I was. Gosh, choking on that right now. How useless I was. I remember being 7 years old and he was so angry, he was in a rage. His face was white and spit was coming from his mouth. He was inches from my face and quietly poisoning my mind. I challenged him to hit me because I knew he really wanted to, and he flew off in a rage. Lucky for me, I think, because he had the potential to beat me up, but he never did it physically. One of the things I really struggled to understand was when he would come back to me later after times of abusing me and say, "But you know, I love you. You know, I do, don't you?" This would leave me so confused. His behavior said he hated me, but he loved me. All it would take was to hear his car come down the driveway at night, and my heart would sink and the anxiety would rise. I never knew what mood would walk in the door. I learned how to adapt my behavior to whatever mood he was in. Always trying to be a good girl, learning how to be a good girl to make everyone else happy. This was the beginning of the bedwetting, and I'm not going to go into that chapter. I want to talk to you about processing this, right? For any of us, processing this. You know, I look at it now as the person who has, worked on it on different levels, different dimensions, different cycles. And I realized that, looking at my dad, when I started to investigate his mother was not a real nice woman. She was a two-bob snob. And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, she had champagne tastes and a beer life kind of thing. She wanted to be looking like she was a bit of more high society and hang around with that sort of society in the inner suburbs of Melbourne is where they were. Like I said in the book, she didn't want children. She didn't want them at all. She was the second wife um, to Albert, the father. And as soon as Albert died, she just farmed the stepdaughter off. She didn't want her around. But my dad, Ronald, was her offspring. He was her child. So she had to just deal with him in the best way that she knew how, which was poorly. I heard stories from my auntie, my dad's stepsister, saying that she used to lock him up in the cupboard when her lady friends would come around to play cards and have shandies. Shandies is beer with a bit of lemonade or something in it. But she saw herself as um, living in a world, it was a world of fantasy, really. I never got to know her. She died before I was born, not long before I was born. But she had a fantasy world about being, the hoity-toity and living a higher life than what she actually was, you know. And it's interesting because she poisoned my dad's mind, right, by the way she treated him, probably by the way she spoke to him. All sorts of different things. And when my dad had a child, it just turned that programming on in him. He was conditioned on how it was to be a child and his own behavior of his mum on how to be a parent. So as soon as I was born, triggered the conditioning, the programming, and he treated me the only way he knew how, by poisoning my mind. and by abusing me, which is what had been done to him. To what extent, I don't know. But I do know that he went to school. She sent him off to boarding school in Geelong, which was the Christian Brothers school up there. And now, in this current 21st century, we know what happened with a lot of those Christian Brothers schools, right? So I have no evidence, but I would suggest that, maybe dad was one of those boys that got abused sexually there as well. That on top of the abuse of his mother, you know, he was just learning that life was about abuse and it was about trauma, and that's all it was. And that you better learn how to deal with that and you better prepare yourself for that because that's just how life was. Isn't that awful? Happens to so many of us, though, that's the only lens that we have to see the world is through trauma and hardship, and that we better toughen up and we better become tougher and stronger to be able to just deal with it. And in a way, dad was trying to do that with me. He didn't know the behavior was wrong, and I'm not certainly not taking him off the hook with that. This is just an older version of me, a more mature version of me, a more educated and experienced version of me looking back now, right? And going, boy, he could have at some point stopped. Surely could have woken up to it at some point, right? But I don't know anything more than that. So he learned that's how life operated and he was passing it on, right? I mean, that's why something triggered when I was born and he turned around and tried to give me to his stepsister, to my Auntie Wynne. You take her. He didn't want me around, you know? Now, there was hate in that, there was anger in that, but there was also fear in that. And the fear of me just grew as I grew as a child. He had this feeling that I could see through him and I could hear through him. Do you know what I mean? That he was transparent to me. And the truth was, he was. I could see right through him. You think about it, as we're children, we're innocent. We don't have all these filters, layered filters all over us. So we see things for what they are. How many times have you seen a kid say something about, there's that fat lady, right? Or, why is that man, got no hair or something, inconvenient things that kids come out. They're just telling the truth. They're just saying it as it is, right? So, as I said, I'm not excusing him, but I look back at that and I go, okay, I could see the links. The links were starting to appear. So he tried to get rid of me. He couldn't get rid of me. So he got so angry, which tells me that emotionally he was pretty immature, pretty immature. And he slammed the brakes on to try and stick me through the dash. He was just pissed off, right? But that didn't do anything. That just made mum angry and me a bit of a mess to look at until I got cleaned up, right? This was the beginning of the journey of forming Helen, forming who she was going to become. And if you've got somebody who's poisoning your mind, it doesn't matter about how they're treating you because you don't have a filter or experience to go, it's right or wrong. You just know when something doesn't feel right and when something doesn't feel good. Hmm? So it's the beginning of the story, the beginning of the trauma. But can you see that I'm starting to just pull back a little bit from it and starting to observe it and starting to see it from a different perspective? And just one thing to finish off, because we will get deeper into it and we'll go more into how I started to really unravel that trauma and become where I'm at right now with it. One other thing, did you see as I was kind of getting, the energy in my throat and as the energy was moving, yeah, I still get emotional about this. I still get connected to it, which to me is another reason why you shouldn't repeat your stories over and over and over and over again. Because you're creating the energy within yourself and you're creating negativity, you're creating maybe blockages over time and things like that, but that's a whole other subject, right? So if you're going to talk about your story, it's much nicer to do it from an observer perspective than get caught up in the story, okay? Because, we can just actually, through our thinking, create it back into reality. And we certainly don't want to do that. So I hope you got some insight from that. And I say that very respectfully, right? I'm being very, very gentle around this topic of trauma, okay? But it's important. It's important that we start talking about this stuff, but start talking about it in a constructive way, a really constructive and evolved way. So thank you once again for being with me today. I look forward to talking to you again next week. And my love to you all. Thank you so much.